week of Made to Be. Everyone say, woo! That was definitely Cassie. Before we get started, everyone give me 2 claps and a woo. Woo! I'm not going to point the 2 out that didn't go woo. I will just look in their general direction. Let's try it again. Here we go. Woo! There we go. All right. Tech team, do you have my slides running too? They should be back there. If they're not back there, I should be casting. You should see them. All right. So we are in our 3rd week. So in the first week, we talked about how we are all made to know God, right? And then last week, we talked about how we were made to be light. And then I turned all the lights off in here and everyone started freaking out. And then we learned about light and darkness. Who said, oh yeah? See me after class. I'm kidding. So, how many of y'all stay on TikTok? I hear boo. I'm starting to see more hands go up. How many of y'all stay on Instagram? There's more hands. I'm not going to ask about Facebook because only us old people have Facebook. They don't know about MySpace. But unfortunately, we do tend to spend a lot of time on social media looking at stuff. And some of the stuff that we look at and or see are TikTok dances. Who just said they don't know any TikTok dances? All right, so we're about to test. Hold on. We're about to test that. Middle schoolers. This is all middle schoolers. You ready? I need someone to get up and hit the gritty. Come on. Hey, y'all are laughing so you know what it is. Someone get up and hit the gritty. Come on, Colt. Come on, Colt. Hit the gritty. There we go. Everyone give Colt a round of applause. All right, go sit down. Go sit down. All right. Y'all were laughing, but y'all knew what it was. All right, now I need someone to stand up and give me a floss. Oh, look at Jason. Everyone look at Mr. Jason. This is proof that old people watch TikTok too. I'm kidding. But y'all look, check it out. But check this out, you guys. For some of us that are lying, that said they didn't know what the gritty was, but laughed when I brought it up. Doing or learning a TikTok dance actually does take a skill, because it may not be a lot of skill, but it does take skill to be able to come up with this. And make it so popular that millions of people know what it is and do it, right? So, thinking about creating a TikTok dance so that people learn how to do it everywhere may seem kind of like light work, because it's not something really dangerous. Unless you're mine and Jason's age and you try to do the floss and you throw a hip out. Then it gets a little dangerous, right? But y'all check it out. So leading a TikTok dance is pretty easy because it's not dangerous. But that looks like light work compared to this next thing. Y'all ready? This is volcano boarding. So there is an actual sport called volcano boarding, where you hike up a volcano with what looks to be a yoga mat. You get to the top of it, you sit on your butt, and then you slide down the entire volcano on a yoga mat. Who said that was easy? I'm pretty sure if you went out and tried to do this by yourself, you would probably die. Because you would get in the wrong part. You would get in the wrong part of the volcanic ash, and you would slide into a rock and go, more than likely. Or you would get at the top and look at the lava and go, ah, and fall in. What you would want to do, y'all listen, what you would want to do if you're doing something this crazy is you would want to go with someone who has done it before, so you can learn from their mistakes, because they obviously didn't die. So they did something right. So you're going to go with them to see how they do it so you can follow in their footsteps. And that is one of the most important things of leadership that you can have, is being able to follow. You've got to be able to follow before you lead. So leadership boils down to this. It boils down to our life experiences, because we can help others learn from our mistakes, like volcano boarding, right? So I have a lot of different experiences that people can learn from. Mr. Jason has a lot of military experience and a lot of other experiences that we can learn from. Miss Allison has a lot of counseling experience that we can learn from, and that's ways that we can lead, right? Leadership also comes from having the opportunity to lead. And this is what I mean by opportunity. A lot of times when we think of having the opportunity to lead, we think about having a title, right? We're thinking about, like in the church, if this person's going to lead, they need to be a pastor, or they need to be a chaplain, or they need to be a student leader, right? That's not what opportunity is. You got to think of it like this. How many of you watch YouTube? A lot more hands. How many of y'all watch people do game playthroughs? All right, so let me ask you this. That person that does game playthroughs, are they a developer 9 times out of 10? No, they're not. They don't hold a title, but they're able to lead you through the game because they've gone through it and experienced it, right? It's kind of the same thing. Or if you see someone that builds their own PC. There's a guy here at church, Brian, if you know who Brian is. If you remember Brian, let me hear a round of applause for Brian, who's not here. If y'all didn't know, Brian has built his own PC. Now, Brian is not a computer scientist by any stretch of the imagination, and I hope he sees this. But Brian is able to build a PC because he has experience, and he could lead you through that. And another aspect of leadership is teachability and integrity. You having experience and skill is important, but the biggest thing that you've got to be willing to do is to admit when you've got something wrong and be able to be corrected by it, right? The most important thing that we need to get from all of this is starting from humility, right? We need to be willing to help others grow instead of trying to do things for ourselves, because we are all made to lead. It doesn't matter if you're a youth leader, if you're not a youth leader, if you're a pastor or not a pastor, if you're a worship leader up here on the stage, or if you're just in the seat. You are made to lead. Now, to show you guys that anyone can be a leader, and we're going to see what it's like to be a leader in Christ, is we're going to talk about one leader. There are a bunch of leaders in the Bible, right? Someone give me a leader in the Bible. Noah. Who else? Moses, David, Jesus, Joshua, Jonah. They're all leaders. I heard you, Jaden. They're all leaders, but we're going to talk about someone that usually doesn't get talked about a lot. Ladies, let me hear you make some noise. Tonight we're going to talk about a lady named Esther. Why are we going to talk about Esther? This is why. Esther is going to show us what it means for most of us to be leaders, because she sits in the position of leadership that most of us in life are going to sit at. Not all of us will be a Moses who parts the Red Sea. Not all of us are going to be not me, David, but the Bible David. Not all of us are going to be a King David that was known as a man after God's own heart. We're not going to be, a lot of us aren't going to be a Paul. We're not going to be a Peter, but we can all be Esthers. Now, I want to set it up. Tonight we're going to be in Esther chapter 4, and I'm going to be reading verses 13 through, I think, 16 is what I'm going to be reading. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Esther chapter 4. We're going to be reading verses 13 through 16, but I'm going to set it up. All right, y'all ready? So, Esther was part of the Jewish people, and they were living far, 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 far away from their home country. So she had a cousin named Mordecai. How many of y'all have ever watched Regular Show? Oh, Mordecai. So she had a cousin named Mordecai, and they lived in a city called Susa. there are some weird names in the Old Testament, but they're fun to say. Susa. I heard you, Susa. All right. It was part of the Persian Empire. Now, the king of Persia, his name was Xerxes. See, I told you, that has like a bunch of X's in it. Xerxes, he was on the search for a new wife, and after his former queen angered him, he got rid of her, and all she had refused to do was dance for the guests of a party that they were at. That's all she did. It angered him, and he was like, you know what, you're not my wife anymore. I'm finding something else. So, Xerxes then chose his next favorite girl and made her the new queen, and that was Esther. Okay? So, he forced her to marry him. She followed his orders. She didn't willingly choose the throne, it chose her. He became obsessed with Esther and favored her cousin Mordecai. So what ended up happening is we read about this dude named Haman. Now, I've talked about Haman in here before, and we have all booed Haman. So we're going to do that. Everyone boo Haman. So we're booing Haman because he made a plot to kill all the Jewish people in the kingdom, right? And Mordecai uncovered and stopped a plot to assassinate the king. But because the Jews were ruled by Persia and the king's mood and anger were hard to predict, Esther and Mordecai kept their Jewish identities a secret for their own safety. Because, see, Xerxes didn't know that they were Jews. So, Haman convinced the king that the Jewish people were a threat to his kingdom due to their devotion to one God. And then he claimed, which he claimed prevented them from fully serving the king. Because back then, especially in Persia, you worshiped the king of the country. So, and this was fueled because he had a personal grudge against Mordecai. He persuaded the king to enact a plan to kill all the Jews in the kingdom, not realizing that his wife, the Queen Esther, was Jewish. So, this dude put into play for the king to kill all the Jews, which would include his wife, which he didn't know his wife was Jewish because she hid her identity. So, put yourself in Esther's shoes for a minute. She was far away from home. She got kidnapped and forced to marry an extremely powerful, dangerous, and crazy dude. Crazy. She was dealing with more than any person should ever be forced to deal with, but then she was hit with an even bigger, scarier challenge. The king was going to carry out a genocide on her people. Yes, that is crazy. So, she could try to stay quiet and hide her own identity and try to survive, or she could reveal her true identity, which would almost certainly lead to her death. So we're going to see what she did. Y'all ready? Check this out. So what ended up happening as we get into this is after some back and forth between Esther and Mordecai, we see what happens. He says, he's sitting back this answer. This is Mordecai talking to Esther. He says, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, said, go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. So she asked him, said, get everyone together and y'all fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my attendants will fast as you do. And this is what is done. I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So, what Esther said was, I need your guys' help. I need y'all to pray for me. I need y'all to fast for me, because what I'm going to do is it is against the law for me to go to the king unannounced. But I'm going to do it anyways on behalf of my people. If I die, I die. So, Esther accepts the call, and she moves forward to make this brave decision. But what does this mean? Y'all check it out. Esther would reveal her Jewish identity to the king and hope that he wouldn't execute her on the spot. Because what y'all don't understand until you read all of Esther is that King Xerxes, he was bipolar. He would be happy one minute, and then the next minute, he'd take your head off just for looking at him weird. And especially if you went and approached him without an appointment, he would do it. He'd take your head off in a heartbeat. But she wanted to do it to try to change his mind. It was an extremely risky strategy, and by the time she decided to try, it was at the scariest possible moment. Y'all, Esther was in an absolutely terrible spot. Everything was wrong. It was out of her control. But what did she do? If you read forward, what we end up seeing is that she chose not to focus on what she didn't have. Instead, she focused on what she did have. She had the people that she loved, the Jewish people, right? She had the favor of the king, even if his mood was unpredictable. And she had just a slight chance of speaking with him face to face. And she also had the courage to do what was right, even though she wasn't really in a position to do so by all of our standards. She stepped up when it was tough to do the right thing. And she didn't have a title. She was just a normal old person, because back then, yes, she was the queen, but the queen had no power. It was all the kings. So she really couldn't do anything, but she did. She had no title, no real responsibility to lead, but she stepped up and she decided to lead her people. So what happens is she ends up going to King Xerxes, and he shows her grace and favor. What happens is if the king wasn't going to cut your head off, he would take his golden scepter and point it at you. That's how you knew you weren't going to die. So she went, he pointed his scepter, and he's like, hey, what can I do for you? She's like, I've got a favor to ask. He's like, you're my queen. Everything up to half of the kingdom I would do for you. So she ends up telling him about this whole plot, and he gets furious because he's being deceived. So what happens is this is done at a party. She plans a party to get him in a good mood, and she tells him at this party, and then Haman, for all his trouble and trying to rise up against the king, he gets taken out. The circumstances in Esther's life was unfair and completely out of her control, but that's what made her such a great leader. It wasn't because she was given a title that made her a leader. The previous queen proved that the position only had meaning so long as the king said so. Y'all remember, he had a queen, and she was made not the queen just because she didn't hit the greeting in front of the people. So that title meant nothing unless the king said so. And that's what I want us to get, you guys. Well, we are made to be leaders by leading people to Christ, and you don't have to have a title to do that. You don't have to be a pastor. You don't have to be a youth leader. You don't have to be this or that. Leadership is about what someone does no matter what position they find themselves in, and they're doing it with godly intent to the upliftment of others around them. It's about doing what's righteous no matter what it costs or how big or how small the thing that you're doing is. And what we see, I'm running short on time. I'm going to summarize this, but if you're taking notes, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 4 through 9. What we see is a letter being written to the church of Corinth. And what happened is this church was flourishing until they started arguing over something. They started arguing over who the real leader of the church was. Isn't that kind of crazy? That would be like us coming in here on a Sunday and being like, I only follow Pastor Tony. Well, I only follow Pastor Dan. What about Pastor Eric? What about this guy? And then the church gets divided because they're trying to pick which pastor is the actual pastor of the church. And what we see said here is that, y'all check it out. Let me see, where do I want to start? I'm going to start at verse 4 real quick. It says, I always thank God for you because of his grace given to you in Christ Jesus. In who? Christ. In who? Christ. One more time, in who? Christ. He gave us grace, right? It says, for in him you have been enriched in every way with all kinds of speech and with all knowledge. God thus confirming our testimony about Christ among you. And then it says, God's blessed you that you do not lack any spiritual gift as you eagerly wait for your Lord Jesus to be revealed. It says he will also keep you firm to the end so that you will be blameless on the day of Lord Christ. And then what he ends up getting into is you have people being like, well, I'm going to follow Paul. I'm going to follow Apollo. I'm going to follow Cephas in this church. But what Paul says is we all need to be united under the name of Christ and the things that Christ gives us, because we're not leading people to Pastor Tony. We're not leading people to Pastor Eric. We're not leading people to Allison or to David or to Jason. We're leading people to Jesus. If you are under Christ, you have the same things that the Church of Corinth did. You have God's grace. You have spiritual giftings that God has blessed you with. You might not think so, but he is giving you the words to share Christ with others. He's giving you a testimony to share with others. Paul points out a problem is that they were just trying to decide who the leader was, and they were taking their focus off the one who we should be focusing on is Jesus. Being a leader, you guys, is about using whatever gifts, skills, power, position or non-position that God has placed you in this part of your life to uplift all the people around you. Now, as we're going to small groups, this is what I want you guys to think about. There are all types of great leaders. God calls people to be pastors of churches that have tens of thousands of people. God calls people to be politicians that are able to make laws to influence the life of those around them. He makes people, for some reason, to be leaders on TikTok, to have millions of people follow them to watch stupid dances. They have lots of followers. Their decisions affect a lot of lives at one time. And a lot of times these big leaders are in the spotlight, and that's what we like to compare ourselves to. But those aren't the only leaders, you guys. Those aren't even the most influential leaders. I want you guys to think about this. Those politicians that are in office, guess what they have around them? People who influence them. These pastors have deacon teams that influence and help guide them. It's the people that lead from the middle that often have the most influence. I want you guys to think of it like this. You may not be able to recite me every Bible verse in the Bible, but God has done something in your life that if you led by example and lived it out every day, you have more influence on those around you than if they were to sit in this room for 2.5 straight hours and listen to someone that they don't know. That's what it means to be a leader in God's family. It's to lead from the middle. Don't wait for a position. God's giving you all the tools that you need to be a leader, whether you feel like you're ready or not. Because if you look in the Bible, Moses wasn't ready to lead, but God used him anyway, and he gave him a helper, his brother Aaron. There were a bunch of people in the Bible that didn't feel like that they were ready to lead. Jonah ran. Peter walked on water and then took his eyes off and fell, but then he became someone great. Saul was a religious leader that was persecuting Jews and killing them, persecuting Christians and killing them. And then God changed him miraculously, and then he started leading with the stuff that God gave him. Now, he became a great leader, but he started leading before that. So as we go into small groups, ladies, I think we have more girls, so y'all are going to be in here. Oh, Jaden said woo, so y'all were going to meet in the bathrooms. Boys, we're going to meet in the foyer, But this is what I want us to think about as we go into our small groups. We're all called to be leaders. We're all called to lead people to Christ. No matter how much you don't think you know, you're called to share that to lead people to Christ. If God has given you a bunch of responsibility and God has given you a position to where you have influence over others, use that for God's glory and not yours to lead others to Christ. So